Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much for your patience while we were delayed a little bit. I have a few things to talk about up top, and then we'll get right to your questions. Object.
We were able to get some fighter aircraft up and around it before the order to shoot it down, and the pilot's assessment was that this was not manned.
Was really sort of now in hindsight interesting to look at the timing of, as they just discovered this other object last night. She talked about her anger, but she said the fact of the matter is Alaska is the first line of defense for America. Let's take you now to the Pentagon for their briefing.
While we were delayed a little bit, I have a few things to talk about up top, and then we'll get right to your questions. So first of all, to add to information already provided earlier by the White House, at the direction of the President of the United States, fighter aircraft assigned to U.S. Northern Command successfully took down a high-altitude airborne object off the northern coast of Alaska at 1:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time today within U.S. sovereign airspace over U.S. territorial water. On February 9, North American Aerospace Defense Command detected an object on ground radar and further investigated and identified the object using fighter aircraft. The object was flying at an altitude of 40,000 feet and posed a reasonable threat to the safety of civilian flight. U.S. Northern Command is beginning recovery operations now. U.S. Northern Command's Alaska Command coordinated the operation with assistance from the Alaska Air National Guard, Federal Aviation Administration, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We have no further details about the object at this time, including any description of its capabilities, purpose, or origin. The object was about the size of a small car, so not similar in size or shape to the high-altitude surveillance balloon that was taken down off the coast of South Carolina on February 4. Separately, U.S. Northern Command continues their recovery operations in support of the recent takedown of the Chinese high-altitude surveillance balloon. Recovery teams have mapped the debris field and are in the process of searching for and identifying debris on the ocean floor. Debris that's been recovered so far is being loaded onto vessels, taken ashore, cataloged, and then moved onwards to labs for subsequent analysis. And while I won't go into specifics due to classification reasons, I can say that we have located a significant amount of debris so far that will prove helpful to our further understanding of this balloon and its surveillance capabilities. Of note, due to less than favorable sea states right now, teams will continue to conduct underwater survey and recovery as conditions permit. The department wants to thank our interagency partners from the U.S. Coast Guard, the FBI, and state and local authorities for their continuing assistance and partnership. And with that, I will take your questions. We'll start with Associated Press, Tara Kopp.
Hi, thank you for doing this. A couple of questions on this latest shoot down. First, what type of U.S. fighter aircraft were used, and what type of munition did they fire? And do you already have Navy assets or Coast Guard assets involved in a recovery process? And then I have a few more.
Thanks, Tara. So the aircraft that took down the object was an F-22, flying out of Joint Base Elmendorf in Alaska. It employed an AIM-9X to take down the object. In terms of assets that are currently involved, in terms of recovery, we have HC-130, HH-60, and CH-47 aircraft participating in that recovery effort.
Okay. You mentioned there was a reasonable threat. Was there also a threat to potentially this object detecting some of our more sensitive radar capabilities that are based in Alaska? And then what hasn't been said is where this object has come from. Is there any indication that this was also a Chinese surveillance balloon object, whatever it is?
Yeah, so at this point, we don't know the origin of the object. Again, we will know more once we're able to potentially recover some of those materials. But the primary concern, again, was the potential hazard to civil flight. And so, again, we'll know more later. Thank you.
No perceived threat to any of the radar installations that we have based in Alaska?
Again, right now, we'll know more once we assess it. We'll just leave it at that. Thank you. Liz.
What made this?
Thank you.
Thanks for taking my question. What made this threatening enough to shoot down? What is different about this object than the last object that was over Alaska? Because it was chosen not to shoot the last one down over Alaska.
Yeah, so the important thing to understand here is anytime we detect anything, we're going to, first of all, observe it and then make a decision and take appropriate action. So you have to look at each individual case on its own merits. In this particular case, given the fact that it was operating at an altitude that posed a reasonable threat to civilian air traffic, the determination was made and the president gave the order to take it down.
Was there a specific threat, a specific civilian air traffic incident that could have happened?
Again, as you well know, civilian aircraft operate, at a variety of ranges up to 40 to 45,000 feet. So again, there was a reasonable concern that this could present a threat to or a potential hazard to civilian air traffic. So let me.
Just one more question.
Yep.
Has Secretary Austin reached out to his Chinese counterpart or any other counterparts at all since this has been tracked?
Since this particular object, no. Let me go here, and then I'll come over to Oren.
Things from the previous balloon have been recovered. What additional information you have now about the capabilities of that balloon?
Yeah, so we're continuing to assess that. Again, I'm not able to go into more detail other than, in addition to learning a lot about the balloon and the capabilities that it has while it was over the continental United States, we have identified or located a significant amount of debris on the ocean floor that will be very beneficial to us learning more about it. But at this point in time, I'm not going to have more details.
Manufacturing label on these equipments or the balloons indicate that they're all manufactured in China, sourced from China?
Again, I'm not going to have details to provide it at this point in time.
Also say that
Last
39 other countries have indicated they have seen balloons in their territories. Are you sharing those information from the Pentagon to these countries, or the capabilities, how you shot them down?
So in terms of what we're learning about these balloons, I know the State Department has talked to this in terms of our international outreach. Certainly, the Department of Defense plays a role in those relationships, and so we will continue to work with our allies and partners to share information along with our State Department colleagues. Let me go to Oren.
Two questions. First, did this object show any signs of maneuverability or propulsion? And then you and other Pentagon officials made a big deal about how much intelligence was gathered by letting the other one float across much of the United States, and yet you shot this one down before it entered the United States. Is that the Pentagon bowing to political pressure? Was there nothing to gain from this one?
Yeah, so again, we're going to judge each of these on its merits. No indication at this time that it was maneuverable, but again, we'll know more. And in terms of entering the United States, it did enter U.S. airspace, and we took it down.
Did you gain intelligence from this one as you did from the previous one?
We're going to recover what we can from this, and more to follow.
And was the decision to shoot it down before it entered too far into the U.S. airspace, the Pentagon bowing to political pressure from the Hill?
Look, again, we're going to judge each of these objects on its own merits. It entered into U.S. airspace on February 9th. We sent up aircraft to assess what it was. The decision was made that it posed a reasonable threat to civilian air traffic. The president gave the order to take it down, and we took it down. Thank you, Laura. And then I'll go to Dan.
Thanks. Sorry. Thanks for taking my question. So a couple questions. First of all, has anything like this happened before with an object this size, this shape, in this particular height for the 40,000 foot range? Has it happened before? And then second of all, can you say more about why you knew that last balloon or object was from China, whereas this one you don't know?
So in terms of this particular object, again, as I highlighted, we don't know where it's from. It posed a reasonable threat to civilian air traffic, and so the determination was made to take it down. In terms of the other balloon, as I mentioned in our previous briefing, we have learned a lot about the Chinese surveillance high-altitude balloon program. We've gathered a lot of information over the last couple of years, and so we were able to, based on that information, detect at a very early stage. As it approached U.S. airspace, we had a good understanding of what it was. As I mentioned, we were able to monitor that closely, track it while it went over the continental United States, learn a lot about it, and take it down at the appropriate time.
So would you urge us to put this in a different bucket than that, or should we?
Yeah, I think I was pretty
these?
clear. This was traveling at about 40,000 feet, which posed a reasonable threat to civilian air traffic, and the decision was made to take it down. So, Dan.
When the pilots approached it, and they determined, I understand, that it was not manned. How did they determine that? And at that point, wouldn't it be possible to at least describe what they were looking at? Did it resemble a balloon or an airplane or what?
Again, we'll know more and have more information once we've recovered this. I will give credit to our pilots that they're very capable in terms of looking at an object, assessing whether or not this had the potential to be manned. At that altitude, something that small, very, very unlikely that it was manned. And so, again, no indication that it was manned. Presented a potential reasonable threat to civilian air traffic, and we took it down.
What speed was it traveling at, by the way?
I don't have that information.
All right, we've been listening to Pentagon Press Secretary, Air Force Brigadier General Patrick Ryder hold a briefing about a high-altitude object shot down earlier today. And it was taken down over Alaskan airspace at approximately 1:45 p.m. Eastern. He said a significant amount of debris had already been recovered and taken onto vessels to be analyzed.
The press secretary said this was roughly the size of a small car, matching what we just heard from.
Fighter jet shoots down an unknown object flying off the coast of Alaska.
The important thing to understand here is anytime we detect anything, we're going to, first of all, observe it and then make a decision and take appropriate action. So you have to look at each individual case on its own merits.
It was discovered over Alaska sometime in the last 24 hours. The object is described as roughly the size of a small car. At about 40,000 feet, the Pentagon and White House say it posed a, quote, reasonable threat to civilian flights. So far, it's not clear where the object came from.